Yo, 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 what's up, everybody? Welcome to today's interview. I am Cody, your Capes Crusader, and we're keeping it geekly with Nina Aberlein. She is the creator of Sunrise Blossom and another comic as well, and we're going to be touching into her Kickstarter campaign as well as her history as a comic creator. So if you want to go ahead and give us a little introductory.
So my name is Nina Daisy Aberlein. I'm an Italian-Canadian comic artist. I've been working in comics in the past 6 years or so. I'm the author of Sunrise Blossom. I like cappuccinos. I like bears. I like the color brown and pasta.
So how is creating comics over in Europe? I'm really familiar with the American side of things. Is there a lot of like differences and barriers you have to jump through to, get your books out there?
Well, it's a very different market. And also like the styles of comics over in Europe are very different from like Japan and America and so on. Though it's something that in the last 10, 20 years like has diminished a little bit. So like in the 90s, for example, America had their American comics. They had DC, Marvel, and they had a few others, but like Image, Dark Horse, but honestly, nobody cared about those in the 90s as much. And in Europe, we had the Italian school of comics, which was like Bonelli, Tex, Dylan Dog, which to be honest are kind of only known in Italy. But here there are like huge titles. And then like France and Belgium had Asterix, Obelix, 1010, Lucky Luke, etc., which are like completely different from any other comics around. And Japan had its manga. And like for a long time, like everyone kind of stuck to their own comics. But when anime started to become more mainstream, it kind of started taking over, like both there in North America as well as here in Europe. So like here, if you go to a comic convention, anyone who is like 50 and older will like stick to the same comics that have like not changed since like the 90s. And the younger folks are all about the Boku no Hero schools and stuff.
Yeah, it seems like manga is definitely taking over to the industry really fast. It's spreading like wildfire compared to what comics used to be back in the day. I'm just really curious. How did you get your start in the comic industry? What kind of drove your passion to become a comic creator?
Well, I started when I was in high school, and so like my first comics I drew when I was a teenager, and I guess that initially like I was such like a fan of like comics that like I wanted to contribute and I wanted to like do my own pretty much. And that's initially how I started, but that's not enough drive. It's not enough of a motivation to keep someone to keep someone doing something. Like there's a lot of people who like start a comic as like, yeah, I want to do one too, and then they drop it within 2 months. What kept me going, however, was the fact that I had grown so attached to my characters that I knew that if I didn't bring the story to completion, no one will, and they would be miserable forever. So I did it so that my characters could have some closure.
So are you write and do the art as well? So what is the day in the life of a writer / artist? That seems like a lot of work on both ends for you to shoulder.
Well, the writing is actually for me like the hardest part because I'm definitely more of an artist than I am a writer. Like sometimes like I can spend like long nights and long hours just like bashing my head against the wall. Like, what do I make them do now? Work, brain, think, damn it. But then sometimes the creative juices just start flowing and like writing nonstop. But once the scripting is done, once the storyboarding is done, then the rest is a lot more chill, kind of. Like after like the more thought-wrenching process is done, I can like turn my brain off and go on autopilot for the rest of the process, pretty much. And like many creative people, alas, it's not something that I do full time. So normally like my days are spread rather half and half between comic work and regular work. So if I'm not working, so if like I work in the morning, then the afternoon I do comic. If I work in the afternoon, then in the morning I do comic. And it's like pretty much like balanced like that, so that like every single slot in my calendar is full. Though I do like have like the occasional Netflix and chill in between.
Yeah, I mean, while you're working, you're always probably dreaming of like the next step in the process as well. What goes on with the storyboard and the roadmap for everything? It seems like it would be a pretty big process. I like, for me, as someone outside of the comic industry, I've always enjoyed the writing, because that's what's, sucks. The art, takes my, interest, and then the writing is what captures me. So for me, I would just be so afraid of like writing myself into like a block or writing myself into something I'm not able to really get out of. So what all goes into your storyboard? And I guess, how do you get out of those scenarios where you feel trapped?
I try to not get into them in the first place. So pretty much what I do, like before I start like scripting like a chapter or something like that, is that I try to have like the overarching part of that story, like have like the like the main trunk of the story already ready, and then I only have to like work out the small branches and details that relate to that. So like before I get into scripting and storyboarding and everything, like I have like a million different notebooks with like small story ideas, general plot points, character design, like tropes that I think would work well for this character or in this scene. And so I try to like put those together to work them as a story, but like I have like a general outline already, and like I just have to work in the details. And though if I get stuck, I have this tiny little book where I have like random, absolutely nonsense plot points that I wrote down because they just came to me, and I just pick one out and I put it in.
Hey, that works though. That works.
Yeah. So stuff like, I don't know, the main character is walking in a park, talking on a phone, and she sees a mouse and start chasing it, for example, stuff like that.
So, I mean, let's just get right into it. You said you had a book. I know we were talking a little previously about it. What was your first book that you worked on? And what went into that, the plot? And then let's go ahead and move into this Kickstarter campaign you got going.
So the very, very first like serious comic that I worked on was Our Name Was Maya, and it's this one right here. So I started it in high school. It's 94 pages, and it's the story of pretty much this young girl who was born with two souls in her body. Like, oops, it happens. But the two souls, like, they were polar opposites, and when she died, one went to heaven and one went to hell. And the main plot of the comic is the two souls trying to reunite, because they're kind of like meant to be together, and one is trying to escape hell and the other is trying to escape heaven, just so that they can be reunited, because they had lived their entire lives as one being, and it's like they were missing some part of themselves because they were like ripped apart and separated.
No, that's a really cool concept, and you did that in high school too.
Yes, I started in high school, and in the end they are reunited, and they live happily ever after as one being.
That is
again.
So cool. That is awesome. In high school I was flunking school and skipping out on class and everything, and you have a full published book.
Me too. That's what I did when I was.
So let's go ahead and talk about Sunrise Blossom. It's a coming-of-age story about Ivy, a young falcon harpy abandoned by her birth mother and raised by a family of owls. So let's go ahead and just break it down. What's the first volume like? Ivy, let's go ahead and talk about Ivy and, your thought process into creating that character.
Well, if you like harpies, if you like drama, if you like big falcons, and if you like girls kissing, then then Sunrise Blossom is definitely the kind of content that you might enjoy. So Ivy, and actually like both of the leading ladies are characters that I put a lot of work in, like both character design wise and personality wise and like drive wise, because and I know this might sound a little bit cliche, and I know this the same for like a lot of like writers in particular, but both of them are different parts of me, pretty much. So like Ivy she's a young harpy. At the beginning of the story, she's 19. She's a little bit bratty. She's a little bit immature. She's a bit childish. And she knows what she wants, and she goes straight to get what she wants. While the other leading lady, Violet, she is mature, she is hardworking, she is responsible, she has the weight of the world, the weight of the world on her shoulders. And so they're not very similar, but they're both two sides, that I have like experienced of myself, and they're coming to get to know each other, and they're getting closer, and they're slowly falling in love with each other. Is kind of like reconciling two different parts of myself a bit, which is like what made writing them like even more interesting and fun, and good for me.
So is it hard? Do you feel like it's harder to write about characters who portray different sides of you compared to your first book? Like, did your first book have any parts of you that you wrote in there as well?
Yeah. I mean, actually, like for the first book, it was actually a very similar theme. Like there were two girls like from one body, and they got separated and were trying to reunite with each other. I guess it's something like the ego and the id, or something like that. Like the Freudian or Jung, I don't remember stuff. Like the different sides of like the one person. Like trying to reconcile.
Yeah.
And like be together a decent human being.
So how would you say, like, is it harder to publish and produce a book where there's a love interest of this nature? I'm not exactly sure how it is over in the European countries, but some, in America, some people could be against that, which, that's on them if they want to be of that nature. But do you experience any sort of similar backlash, from where you're at in the country?
Yes and no, but like mostly like because I put myself out there like so much, a bit, that like normally people who are against it are like, oh, okay, but then like most of them, not all of them, but most of them kind of like ignore it and move on. But it's also like Girls Love Comics also have a very dedicated audience a bit. Like, I don't know how familiar you are with the terms yuri and yaoi, but like they're heavily fetishized portrayals of gay couples, which luckily in the past few years has gotten better. Like they're no longer as fetishized, and they're starting to become more realistic. And the realism of the relationships is something that I have a lot of pride in this comic, because the way the relationship between all of the characters is like also heavily based on relationships that I have in real life, both like friendly, romantic, and so forth. And so like, anyway, those are realistic. But going back to what you were saying, there is like a big audience for exactly this type of content. So like most of the people who are against it, like some people are like, ew, growth, and I'm like, fine, whatever.
Yeah.
But there is also like a pretty decently sized audience for this type of content.
No, absolutely. Just looking at your Kickstarter right now, your goal was $563, and you're at $1,741. I don't know if that's translated to USD or not, but you tripled your goal. So I mean, the audience is definitely there. Would you say, how would you say the success of Volume 1, propelled into Volume 2? How would you say everything from what you experienced with Volume 1, what did you take from that to go into Volume 2 with?
Well, there were, in the beginning of Volume 1, a lot of mistakes were made. mainly because after I finished Our Name Was Maya, I wanted to experiment with something a little bit different. And so like the first 100 or so pages of the first volume were mostly in like black and white or in grayscale, and I was also posting these as web comics online, and the numbers were not doing so hot until I realized, maybe black and white isn't the best in the modern day.
Mm-hmm.
Like in the 90s and early 2000s, the black and white comics were more popular, they were more acceptable because printing in black and white was cheaper and it was also cheaper to distribute like that. But these days, with everyone reading on their phone, it's not quite the same.
Yeah.
So after like 100 pages or so, I started doing everything in full color. But because like a third of the volume was originally in black and white, the first volume I had to print in grayscale. Also for a matter of cost, because the first volume is pretty thick. It's 223 pages. It was pretty big.
So, how much extra workload did it add doing everything in color?
Like does take me more time, like in general, to do a page in color than not. But there were also a lot of shortcuts that I picked up
Okay.
along the way. Because, like, for example, like just to show you a really ugly example, when I was doing originally everything in black and white, like this is one of the very first pages of the first volume, and keep an open mind, please, because pages now are a lot better. They're so much nicer. So, like, I also had to do the backgrounds, like, what's the word? Like, I had to do them, like go over them with the pen normally.
Mm-hmm.
While with most webcomics these days, both online and those who are also printed, many of them tend to use mostly 3D models for the backgrounds. And so I've also been using a lot of those, like to help me, a bit, like to be able to produce quicker. And with those, I didn't have to like go over them and study over them nearly as much. And, also a lot of like technical shortcuts, like being able to use more keyboard shortcuts and, well, pretty much like a lot of shortcuts, as well as, like experience gathering that allowed me to do everything faster. So even though all my pages are in full color now, they roughly take me the same time as like regular black and white page did at the beginning of the first volume.
Okay, yeah. I mean, shortcuts are pivotal, though. I mean, you start learning something, and it feels like you're not really making progress with it, but then a month from there, you're like doubling your workload slowly but surely. What would you say the best shortcut you've learned along the way has been, like the most beneficial to what you do?
I know there's a lot of people who will disagree with this, but I really, really enjoy using 3D models for backgrounds. Because, like, of course, like you need to have at least the basics of perspective, to understand like how to use it and how to draw the characters in relationship to the perspective of the image. And also, often enough, you need to have like a little base in 3D modeling and so forth. But 3D backgrounds have helped me a lot. Like, they have made everything so much faster. And like, they also allow me to do like very dynamic shots. So like bird's eye view shots, or like worm's eye, or like bug's eye view shots, that if I did them all manually would take a lot of studying and a lot of work. like technically I could do them manually, but it takes so much work that it's not really as worth it anymore. And I love them so much. But like Clip Studio, which is the drawing program that I use, has so many tools and so many wonderful things that, oh my gosh, I love it so much. That has also allowed me to do things a lot faster and a lot better.
I mean, for me, I have no idea where to even begin with any of that. And I mean, just what you're describing, I can only imagine like trying to draw something from a bird's eye view. You'd have to learn about the different perspectives and it just seems like it would be a lot to try to learn. So let's go ahead and just start breaking things down. Let's talk about Ivy a little bit. What went into your creative process? Why did you lean towards a falcon harpy outside of maybe a more traditional norm?
Well, when I was in the second year of comic school, which I went to after high school, one of the assignments that they gave us was to draw a short 4, 5, 6-page comic on absolutely anything we wanted, as long as the style was leaning more towards like the French style. Like on the top of my head, I had this like nice idea of this like woman driving her car at night, singing to herself. She's got off work, she's going home to relax and rest. So she's driving home, half distracted. It's dark, and all of a sudden, like this big bird appears in front of her windshield, and she crashes into the bird. She panics. She gets out of the car and she rushes to the bird to try and aid it. And she sees that this bird that is like wounded, like the wing is like a little crooked. It's like shaking, and she's like, oh no, I'm gonna help you. I'm gonna help you. And so she brings the bird home to nurse it back to health, promising to bring it to the vet the next morning. But when she wakes up, she finds a half-naked harpy in her bed. And that's how the short story started. And I actually grew really attached to the concept after that school assignment. And so after I finished, our name was Maya, I started getting into it and like studying the characters more, developing the world more. And so like working on top of that brief top of the head idea assignment that I was given at school.
So what's the world like in Sunrise Blossom? What can readers expect from it? What type of characters do they encounter? Give us a little bit of a breakdown of the world and the population.
Well, the world that I developed in the story, I wanted to develop a world it's like modern fantasy. And I wanted to give it a world that is so similar to ours that if not for a few small details, readers would not notice a difference. So like, for example, the history, and this is something that is also mentioned in the book itself, the history is like the same. And like there are hints here and there of like these half human, half animal people existing like throughout the centuries, like ancient Egyptian gods, mythology, Chinese mythology, Japanese mythology, Northern European mythology, Southern American mythology, like so many like myths and legends and stories. I have like these half animals, half human creatures. And like to the point that one day, like they used to be the norm. But, through the centuries, bit by bit, people started despising them because they were different, hunting them because they were different, or hunting them for their special features. And so that's when they went into hiding and collaborating with only a select few humans that would teach them about human culture and would teach them how to turn human physically, like temporarily like transform in human, so that they could what's the word, like hide in human society if they want to.
Yeah, like camouflage.
Yeah, exactly. Camouflage, that's a word. So something like so technically, like most people have like no idea they exist, but there are like a few people out there that are like, oh, Bigfoot is a real thing, and like in this case, like they wouldn't really be wrong.
So with it being coming of age, what type of issues does Ivy run into, and those type of adventures along the way? And so are some of these experiences things that you ran into yourself? I know, remember you said parts of yourself was in the story as well. So does a lot of what Ivy run into kind of relate to your childhood or coming of age?
Well, yes and no. Like, the way she interacts with a lot of people is the way that I interacted, or I would interact with people when I was like maybe 14 or 15 or so. Like thinking like, yeah, fuck you, I'm king of the world kind of stuff. And that's a bit how she is at the beginning. And the way that I show her gradual growth throughout the story is both through showing her in different scenarios, putting her through things and showing how her thought process gradually changes and shifts into a more mature mentality. Like, to give an example, near the beginning of the first volume, Ivy is traveling with her sister and they have an argument over something really, really stupid. Like, Ivy was commenting on the jewelry her sister was wearing, saying, "Hey, that's ugly. Take it off." And her sister takes offense at that. Is like, "Oh, you can't say that's ugly. Speak for yourself." Like, the markings you have look like they're, I don't know, makeup done by a kid. And then Ivy takes offense and says like, "Oh yeah, well, you have old man eyebrows." And so like they start fighting, and like they get separated. And like, it's the kind of argument that I would have with my sister all the time when I was younger. And so like they have an argument over something really trivial and they are separated. And that like kind of shows a bit her mentality, especially at the beginning. But like, for example, near the end of the first volume, Ivy finds herself in a similar situation in which, because of an emotional outburst, she storms off when she definitely should not have stormed off. But she recognizes and understands that what she did was wrong. And so she is starting to work on herself a little bit and understand how her actions impact others, and is starting to learn a little bit how to be more responsible.
Yeah, no, character growth and development like that is really important, especially for multiple volumes and stuff. And I also noticed at the end of volume 1, it looked like there was a rather dramatic ending.
So dramatic.
So, you know, what ended up happening, and it seemed like there was an old fatherly man that was helping Ivy as well. Did that dramatic ending involve him?
Yes and no. Like, I don't know how much it's okay to spoil the first volume, but there is...
yeah, whatever you want to say, feel free. You know, whatever you don't want to say as well, you know, we can steer around it as well, not a problem.
Okay, so in a way that kind of says it, but not really. For like a third of the volume, Ivy, as well as other Harpy women, have to wear maid outfits, but they don't really want to. It's not out of choice. So that's all I'm going to say. And near the end of the volume, she is saved from that circumstance, but she also receives news that are negatively shocking to her.
Oof.
And, you know, like kind of like makes her really upset, which is the reason why she stormed off in that setting. And then, similar to the beginning of the first volume, she gets lost. But she finds a house that is a shelter for her, where a kind old man lives who takes her in and takes care of her for a while. You know, like treats her as his own daughter, because he had lost his daughter and his wife like a few years back. Like his daughter had run away and his wife had passed away soon after, and so he like stayed in the like this house in the middle of the woods waiting for his daughter to come back. And so he treats Ivy as like his own daughter, and Ivy had never had a father, and she really enjoyed you know, like this kind of like familiar relationship that she was developing with him. But when his real daughter returns, she sees that the relationship that she had with this man wasn't real, and it was just them projecting onto each other what they missed and what they felt they needed. Like, she missed her own family, and so she projected that onto this man, and he missed his daughter and he projected that onto Ivy. And so then that's when she realizes that she can't stay here, and it's irresponsible to like stay here and keep running away from her problems. And that's when she decides to go back, face her problems, and pretty much go on.
So does she ever repair things with her sister, or is that a part of... Okay.
In the second volume, they do.
Okay, you know, that's good to hear. So if you want, let's do you want to talk about the second volume at all? Are you allowed to?
I guess I am. I mean, like a lot of the second volume is like visible in the trailer for the Kickstarter.
Mm-hmm.
So
And then I
yeah.
noticed there was a couple pages you were dropping in the Discord as well.
Mm-hmm.
So I would guess let's start off with how long do you intend for the volume 2 to be compared to volume 1? I know you said volume 1 was like 200 pages.
Well, volume 2 is already complete. It's already formatted for print. The cover's all done. All I'm waiting for is for the funds from Kickstarter to come so that I can send it to the printer and then start shipping the volumes. So the second volume is significantly shorter compared to the first volume. So the second volume is around 53 pages.
Mm-hmm.
But it's in full color, which is like a lot, which is a lot better than the second volume. And the art in general is a lot better than the first volume because of like both artistic growth and because like full color renders everything a lot better. And with shorter, but not really very short, 50-page volumes, I'll be able to crowdfund and share volumes a lot more frequently.
So do you feel like having a shorter book in general made the story more impactful, or do you feel like having more room to work with gave you, more, room to kind of have a larger story?
Well, both a little bit. I mean, like most indie comic series that are out there, like both on crowdfunding campaigns, and like in the indie communities, are not very long. Like many of them are like between 20 and 50 pages long.
Mm-hmm.
Like my own volume is like even if the second volume is shorter than the first one, is a bit longer than the average comic. And like so normally for like series with like multiple volumes in the indie community, they tend to be a little bit shorter, while the bigger volumes, those that are like maybe 200, 300, sometimes even 400 pages, normally tend to be either anthologies or one-off graphic novels.
Yeah.
So because like I want to be able to crowdfund this as often as I can and be able to dish out content as much as I can, I want to go for the shorter volumes. This way I'll also have something that I can actually present when I finally start going back to conventions.
So with there being volume 2, how many volumes do you intend on getting out of this series? Is this something that you just plan on pumping out a volume as you can, or do you have like a end game goal?
Both a bit. Like I don't want to drag it on unnaturally. Like I don't want to do like the classic Naruto, Bleach, One Piece stuff where like, oh, it's bringing in money, so I gotta drag it on as long as possible. No, I want it to reach a natural, good feeling conclusion. And it might be 5 volumes, it might be 10 volumes. Like I'm still not exactly sure, but like I do have like an idea for the overarching story. But I always do I always get ideas for like new subplots and ideas to add here and there. So I don't think it'll be longer than maybe 10 volumes, or like roughly 50 pages each, except for the first one. But we'll see.
I mean, if there's a story to tell, there's a story to tell. And, as like you said, as long as it's not like really dragging on, there's not really issues with ongoing series. It's awesome to see your goal was like tripled. How important are these Kickstarter campaigns to what you do? Like, for instance, how long do you think it would take you to get this book out without any Kickstarter help?
I'm broke, so probably never. Like I teach part-time, and I honestly I barely make enough to like pay rents and bills and food. So, and like with the freaking pandemic, it like shoved me back like a lot. So which is like one of the reasons why I decided, like with the first volume, which I crowdfunded last year, which is why I decided to get into crowdfunding instead of like paying it out of pocket.
Yeah. I mean, the pandemic really like threw the world in a loop. How hard was it? Like, I guess, what was how different were things for you before the pandemic and after in terms of creating your comic?
Well, the moment the pandemic started, I was already like in the middle of a lot of big changes personally that were like completely unrelated to the pandemic. Because literally 2 weeks before lockdown happened, I had moved out of my parents' house and I
Oh
moved in with my
no.
boyfriend. And like like we just moved out and we were like financially secure. Like
Hmm.
he had lost a family member like roughly a year before, which was really sad. But he received some inheritance, which gave him some more financial security, which is like what made him feel it was okay to move out because he could rely on
Hmm.
this. And I had spent like the several previous years, like putting money away so that we could finally move out. And so we did. And then I kind of lost my job immediately after,
Yeah.
and my savings dried out.
Yeah,
And
it was a nightmare.
yeah, and when it came to like comic creation wise, like initially not a lot changed because Sunrise Blossom, before being a printed comic, is a web comic up on Webtoons. So I was still, like keep creating and publishing on the Webtoons platform. But it was really heartbreaking to see like convention after convention after convention being postponed,
Hmm.
canceled, delayed, and technically, like, I should be able to go to one in April. No, to two in April, but fingers crossed.
Yeah. Yeah, I've noticed a lot of them are starting to pump back up here and there. How hard do you think conventions are going to be? Like, are there a lot of restrictions in your area? I know here a lot of them either require a proof of a negative test or a vaccination. Do you think conventions are going to be heavily regulated over there as well?
Well, I think that they're going to ask for proof of vaccine or of negative COVID. Because here we have, I don't know if you have something somewhere, we have something called like the Green Pass. So it's like either on a piece of paper or like on an app on a phone where like if you got the
Hmm.
vaccine, then like you can put it in like the code in this app and it gives you like this QR code. And like when you go to restaurants or cinemas or any public place, like you show them this QR code and they scan it and it says, yeah, this person is vaccinated and they let you in. So I think they might do that. Though when I signed up for the conventions, it didn't say anything about it. So I'm kind of
Yeah.
hoping going to check people at the entrance because
So, what's a convention like for a comic creator as well? I never really had an opportunity to talk about conventions before the pandemic and everything. How important were these to the sales of your book and getting the word out?
oh, not at all. I did absolutely like I barely made any money at all. Like most of the time I didn't even make enough money to cover the booth. But that's the same for like a lot of people,
Hmm.
especially if maybe they're still starting out in the convention world. Like I had started going to conventions in 2018 and I had been going like to a lot of conventions steadily for like a year before everything closed down. But like I feel that now that I have a better understanding of what people who are involved in the indie community want,
Hmm.
and now that I actually have like the freaking book instead of just like a giant bird girl roll up banner
Yeah.
with no real actual material for it there yet, I might be able to. They might go a little bit better, but they were absolutely vital for networking. Like I
Yeah.
made
Yeah.
so many friends and met so many new creators there that it really helped.
So, how does it feel to have the actual physical book in your hand? Going from like a webtoon product to an actual physical product, that has to be, it has to feel like some really good self accomplishment.
It's nice to be able to hold it and see my baby. Look, it's
Yeah.
my baby. She's right there. Look, she's got her midriff out. She's so cute. Look at that smile. She's so cute. It's yeah, that's what it feels like.
So, is there anything else you'd like to talk about in terms of Sunrise Blossom or any other future, pieces of work that you have in progress?
Um, well, I actually I've almost finished the storyboarding, the third volume, earlier today, and I was working on some scenes that were kind of a little spicy, but like very emotionally driven.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like emotionally intense, and I am really, really looking forward to push volume 3 out because it's got some scenes that I really, really want people to see. So get excited for volume
Yeah,
2
yeah.
and getting excited for volume 3.
That's so awesome. I always love seeing creators just get so passionate about their work. Let's finish strong with this. What would you say would be your biggest piece of advice for a comic creator out there struggling right now to get off the ground? You know,
Mhm. Start small. For the love of Quab, start small, please. Because if you jump into a giant project right away, I can almost guarantee you that you'll lose motivation, drop it, and then like feel bad about yourself for like dropping it like that and not bringing it to completion. But it's normal because you're not used to it. It's not something that you can do. And it's a lot like exercising a bit. Like you can't run a marathon immediately.
mm-hmm.
You got to start small. So start small. Start with maybe a 5-page project or a 10-page project. You get that to completion, give yourself a clap, give yourself a pat on the back, because then at that point you've done a lot more than many people who try to get into comics actually do.
Mm-hmm.
And once you're able to bring that to completion, try a little bit longer. Try making a 30-page volume. If that goes well, awesome. Then you can start making bigger projects. And then at that point, creating will be so second nature that you won't even think about it.
Yeah, no, that definitely, taking the proper steps, small steps always lead to larger steps and eventually leaps and bounds. And I think it's often, as a creator in whatever field you're in, it's hard to look at the progress in the middle of the progress. You always have to look back to see how far you've came. And, that gratification from seeing your project finally, hit the shelf, this is awesome. I'm really excited for you. I'm stoked. Volume 3 sounds like it's going to be awesome. And I'm stoked you killed your Kickstarter campaign as well. Guys, once again, this is Cody, your Capes Crusader, and we're here with Nina, and thank you for keeping it geekly with us.
Oh, thank you. I love keeping it geekly. I loved it. Thank you.